Here we go. All right, thanks very much, guys. Thanks for joining us this evening for tonight's masterclass. It's April already, so 1st of April was a few days ago. So yeah, for tonight we'll be discussing everything to do with SeaWeb. So we pulled in Brett to help us with this one. So there's recently been a few additional changes and updates that have been done to SeaWeb, and we thought we'd just inform everyone about all the different changes that have happened. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Brett to take us further through all the different changes, and then we'll go from there. Myself and Dean will run any questions, but you guys are welcome to stick your hand up at any time, and then we'll take it from there. Thanks very much.
Oh, fantastic, Rian. Thanks very much. I'm just going to share my screen quickly. Let me just find the right window. I think it's this one over here. And all of you should see my Google Chrome landing page on the tab over there. Let me know when you guys find it there.
Yeah, it's come up now,
Yep,
Brett.
got it.
Okay, cool, fantastic. All right, it's just going to stay there for now. So basically what I wanted to do was just, as Rian mentioned over there, we've recently done an update to SeaWeb. And those of you who don't know it, we've actually been using SeaWeb for coming on 5 years now. So it's been quite a reliable and I think quite an effective solution for us since the changeover from MIS to SeaWeb. And then recently, sort of at the beginning of this year, about a month or two ago, they had just completed their latest upgrade. So they've really just done a fantastic upgrade to it, which really allows a lot of potential changes going forward into it. And I think just some of the things to touch base on in terms of that upgrade, and a lot of times when people use applications and they use programs on PCs, they want to just see what they see. But actually, a lot of the intelligence and a lot of the importance of it is actually in the background. It's the things that people don't see, and what you won't see, but it's important for people to be aware of, is that it's been upgraded to the sort of the latest cybersecurity. The site has got a better load balancing. So in other words, if a server node somewhere fails, there's a redundancy system that it'll cross over to another server, for example. So it just means that the system itself has more uptime than systems in the past. And then, as you're all aware, Linux, Google, Microsoft, all these providers, they're continually updating and upgrading, and people who develop programs and applications off that, they need to keep suit. And that's really what it is. The name of the game is just making sure that SeaWeb has got as much availability to us, because it's really our critical system for managing our call-out system, our communication system, and keeping control of all of our operational data. Those of you who noticed, I mean, unfortunately, one of the biggest limitations everyone has is our internet speed and our bandwidth. But the application and the program itself, if anyone has sort of played with it a bit over the last month since the upgrade, you would have noticed it. It's a far faster performance, faster response when you're clicking things, and various other features like that. And that's on the back of about 8 months of development work, which has really gone into sort of the underground stuff that people don't really see. And the beauty of that is they've taken it to a new platform, which now means that the visible upgrades that everyone sees will start showing. And literally every 2 or 3 weeks, there's constant updates and things which are tweaking, which is making the system better and more user-friendly for all of us. Okay, so that's really the boring baseline stuff, which I just needed to get out of the way in terms of what the SeaWeb upgrade is. One of the other things that people are aware of is that those of you who've ever heard of the International Standards Organization, or an ISO standard, you will have seen ISO standards for health and safety and for construction and for all sorts of sectors in the world. There is actually one for IT and information security, and SeaWeb is working quite hard to get something called an ISO 27001, which is really sort of compliant with the Microsofts and the Googles and the Facebooks of the world. So it really is a world-class product and a world-class suite that we're working towards over here. All right, so SeaWeb is a good program, and hopefully I've done a bit of convincing that for you. So going back to the sort of the Google landing page over here, Google Chrome is the best PC application that it works with over here. As I always say, it's always best to log in with your own Gmail account to your Google Chrome, and then that enables you to save all your bookmarks. And then if you have bookmarked SeaWeb, and there you can see the URL is https://seaweb.org.za. You arrive at the landing page over here. I actually want to try, sorry, let me just close this down for a moment and start again. Give me a moment so that it comes in, because I want to show you something there. I'm just going to share my screen again. Tell me when you see my Google landing page.
It's back.
Yeah, got it.
Okay, cool. So if you click on that URL, you should land on this sign on page over here. And I've used Google to sort of save my sign on and my password. But what we have now done is also we've authenticated SeaWeb as a site with our Microsoft Active Directory. In other words, if you put in your email address as it is on Microsoft Dynamics, you will notice that you don't have to put in a password. You just put in your email address as it is on Microsoft Dynamics, and then you can click in log in with Microsoft. And that'll take you through to the site without any passwords. So actually from now on, there's no passwords needed. And I haven't tested it, but I'm told those of you who have Google email addresses, you can go log in with Google and it'll use your Google authentication to be able to get in. And those of you who've got two-factor authentication, things like passwords and one-time pins and things like that on your phone, you can use those security features for it. And one of the things that we'll do going forward is exactly the same security requirements we have for management and the EOC and for various people with higher levels of access on station. We'll start to enforce that sort of Microsoft safety in terms of having an OTP so that your logins can't be hacked and people can do the wrong things with it. So this is kind of one of the things that we have with that upgrade is this new Active Directory synchronization. And the long-term quest with all of this is that all of the NSRI IT stuff, so things like e-learning, your Shopify site, and the various other websites that we have to go to with SeaRescue, that eventually will have a single email address and Microsoft Active Directory authentication to go into those sites. So that's kind of the place that we're working to go towards as you go through it. Okay, and as of course, if there are any issues with that, then you do have your password backup if you so need it. But that's the kind of one of the first things that you ought to notice with that. So then you kind of log in and you can see over here, it's synchronizing with Microsoft Active Directory and into you go to the landing page. You'll notice that this is my SeaWeb landing page. So there's probably a few more things down the menu bar on the left-hand side here than most people on stations will see, and that's fine. I'm going to pretty much just stay in the things that you need to see tonight. But just a couple of things that I wanted to just touch base on in terms of this landing page over here. So when you land on the landing page, you see this occurrence book, which most of you have been aware of for quite a long time. And I think an occurrence book is something which is really underplayed in the NSRI practice. So those of you on stations will know that most stations have a paper-based occurrence book or logbook of the station. At certain stations, when crew come into base, they kind of go up to the control room and find the logbook and write the time down and the time that they're on base and the time they're off base. And if they remove a piece of kit off the base, they write it in that occurrence book. So this occurrence book is exactly that. It's a replacement for your paper-based logbook on your station. And you will only see the occurrence book items for your station and things that are relevant. Those of you in SeaRescue EOC or management would be able to see the occurrence items for everybody in the organization. And there's a couple of things that you can see over here. Is you can either see it in a chronological sense, or you can see it sort of the latest for each incident. So the top incident for each. So here you can see this is the chronological 1726 was the last sort of update in a chronological sense, but this is the latest top for each of the different incidents that you can see. And then over here you can see you can toggle it to auto refresh. So when somebody updates something, it'll automatically populate there without having to kind of refresh it as you go through it. What's quite nice about the occurrence book system now, and this is a new thing that people won't notice, and this is particularly for the EOC, and unfortunately tonight I'm going to go into quite a lot of aspects that are relevant for the EOC and probably not so relevant for the station. But I think if we all keep in mind that the EOC is a service function to the stations, and the faster that they can do things, the more they're able to help you, is that let's say there's 10 incidents open at a time, as is often the case on a Saturday or a Sunday, and you radio in with your station. In the past, the EOC would have had to find your specific incident, go into it, wait for it to load, go find that section, update that data, and then at that same time they get a call from another station to update that data. So it becomes quite laborious to navigate in between the different incidents. What the guys can do is they can sort of say over here, rescue 8 damaged, for example, over here, and here you can go select report, and then you can actually select the specific report and go, okay, let's attach that to this specific training incident for rescue 8, and then all you do is click enter, and that populates in the occurrence book in the actual incident report. So that's quite a powerful feature, as I think most people would agree with. And then yeah, so that's really the important thing over here. There is a way of obviously printing these if you want to get some kind of record as such. So that's basically the occurrence book. The various communications that we put out on our WhatsApp group. So for example, our vessel is off run, our vessel has gone to service, this person is away for a couple of weeks. All of those should be communicated through the occurrence book. All right, so that's really kind of the grail that we're working forward to. And one of the pieces of work that SeaWeb are working quite hard on at the moment is integrating this occurrence book and the messaging and the communication through Telegram. So those of you who don't know Telegram, it's especially an alternative to WhatsApp. WhatsApp has quite a closed API, so it's very difficult to do it. Telegram has an open API such that, if any occurrence book items get mentioned for a specific station, you can duplicate that into Telegram and communicate it out. And vice versa, if there's any messages sent on that group, it will automatically populate in the occurrence book for a particular incident. So that's one of the development sprints that's the SeaWeb developers are looking at the moment. And that really just talks through the occurrence book items over here. Okay, so if you want to go into that specific incident, you can see I just open that incident and you go into the specific incident over here. Okay, so that's the occurrence book, and that's some of the changes that have happened there is just the ability to type in an occurrence book entry without having to open an incident. Everyone clear with that, or any questions on that specific aspect over there? Nope. Okay, that's important. Then the other thing what you'll notice is that on this right-hand side over here, all of the open incidents that are happening on stations list up over here. And once again, this is quite valuable for the EOC because incidents where we're still trying to collect data and things like that, the idea is that they shouldn't really be living here. This should be staying as a nice fresh page over here. But we're able to now group certain categories of incidents that are less important sort of in a group. So you can see this one tile over here has 2 active reports in it. And there's 2 different maintenance and logistics incidents. So all the different maintenance and logistics will sit here as one tile. Things like events and training and operations, they each have their own tile, but we could quite easily group all the training tiles as one tile as such so that it makes this a bit clearer. And we may well do that going forward. The other thing which you'll also see is inside various incidents over here, there are sort of incident stages. So you can see this specific training over here is got a little black complete thing. So over here, this incident stage is complete, which probably means this can be moved from open, which is where it shows on this landing page, into sort of validate or closed stage as we go across there.
Brett, does it end up?
Yep, please go ahead. Whoever the hand is.
Okay, now I got my hand up. Unable to see the screen that you are referring to. The one that's shows everyone's names. I'm not following on the presentation.
Okay, so I can't see your screen, but what I would think over here is, let's just check over here. If you go to this, if you can see this little symbol on the top hand side over here, which says back to dashboard, try click on that one over there. That should take you back to this occurrence book page.
Brett, I think your screen share is not going through to some of the online people. Cian, are you via mobile app or are you on a desktop? Over.
Via desktop.
Okay, cool.
online via desktop.
The other thing is maybe try zoom in and zoom out a little bit on your actual screen, because maybe you're just seeing this column over here where my cursor is. Unfortunately, I can't see your screen, so other than sort of clicking on this little incident over here, I'm not too sure how to assist you from there. But what we can do is afterwards we can quickly try log onto your screen and see what you're seeing. Okay, so these incident stages is also a new thing. So if we go into a specific incident over here, let's just choose this one over here, which is an event for Queen Mary. What you'll notice is when you go into a specific incident, the incident is open for editing straight away. And those of you who remember in the past, there used to be a little pencil item up over here. And that little pencil item up on the specific incident page, you had to click on that to be able to edit any information. And that's no longer the case. Now what you can do is you can put information straight into the report, which speeds up the time for the EOC and for control room operators substantially. And then over here at the very first part, you'll see this basic information, incident time, province, title, description. And then this one over here, which says stage, you'll see there's 3 stages. There's a stage which says active, which means that this should be happening right now, which it is. So this incident, this event for Station 5 Durban, right now the station is busy with this incident, and the EOC knows when the stage is set to active to be watching it and to be supporting the station if anything should happen. Once the station has come back from sea, in other words, the boats are on the cradle, the crew are busy washing down the boats, and all the mopping up is being done, what should happen is it should be moved from this stage active into the stage which says awaiting information. All right. And then once all the information is complete, it should be marked as complete. And in the same way, the operation should be moved from to closed over here. So if I go back a page over here, you'll see this little view button on the right hand side there. If you click the view button, just wait for the screen to load, and then you'll see this option which is enabling people to mark it as closed. Please note that the access levels for people on stations. So we have crew level access, and it's just a name. Basically means that crew can log in and see the operations for their station. That's all. Then there's coxswain level access, where crew are able to log in and put information into an operation. And then there's station commander access, which is where you can open an operation as well as move it to closed. So those are the 3 access levels, and nothing's changed with that access level. Those access levels are controlled from Microsoft Dynamics in the crew person's contact card there, which the station management has access to. All right. And then, like I said earlier, when you're in view mode, you go back to this original screen where there was that pencil up over there. So when you do that, you go back to the operation in this specific place over here. The cancel button is when you have incorrectly created an operation in duplicate or something like that. So that's what that's there for. And various other things that you'll see over here in terms of that landing page. The other thing that you'll notice is there's now these little red dots next to some of these fields. And what SeaWeb has done is we have enabled field control to make sure that stations are prompted and reminded to capture the information before they move them to closed. So these fields have to be filled in and checked as such, the sort of categories. And throughout the report, you'll see there are various red dots for data that needs to be populated. So if this station wanted to move this incident to closed, they would not be able to, because you can see there's a blank field over here, a blank field over here, and those blank fields need to be completed before you're able to move it to closed. All right. So that's one of the more powerful things that we have done. Maybe if there's one thing that the stations can take away from tonight's session, and that's really the practice of how to manage SeaWeb. And I think the one thing which has been there since the inception of SeaWeb is that the responsibility for moving an operation from opened to closed rests with the station. And a lot of people have misunderstood the role of the EOC, that the EOC would do that. That's not the EOC's role. It's not the operations manager's role. It's the station's role. And this is a volunteer-led organization. And I think a lot of people have been misunderstood in terms of, thinking that head office is doing things. Head office is here and the EOC is here to support stations, but the leadership of the organization still remains with the stations. And thus the responsibility and accountability and the assurance for getting things done. And as such, these incidents and operations have to be closed off by the station commander, who in essence warrants that the information is captured accurately and completely in terms of that process. What happens sometimes is after 24 or 48 hours or a week, and we see stations aren't getting to it, we will then sort of start getting, probing a little bit to the station and say, listen, we need to capture this data. And if not, we'll do what we can to close it. But that's not what we should be doing. It really shouldn't be the responsibility of the EOC to close stations on behalf of the stations. And in reality, particularly for these training incidents over here, and you can see all of these training incidents are happening tonight. So this one's active. It's still happening at Hout Bay. This one is now completed. So it's about to be moved into closed stage. And this one, I think, is still happening as well. Last sort of post was at 1708. But once a vessel comes back from sea or a vehicle comes back from an operation, what should really happen is the crew should get to work refueling it, washing it down, making the vessel ready to go back out for an operation. And on most stations that I visit, I don't think I know of a station that does that in less than half an hour. And the bigger boats, it's an hour to an hour and a half before all the crew are showered, the vessel's refueled, and all done. And the control room operators and all the coxswains or one of the senior crew can quite easily in that time have completed the SeaWeb report. And I think a lot of the progressive stations, they have a practice that before the crew leave the base to go home, the SeaWeb report is done. And that is done with the same level of importance as refueling the vessel ready to go to the next operation. A lot of stations kind of get lazy and the controllers think, I'll do it tomorrow or I'll do it next week. And it's really not necessary. There is no reason that a report cannot be done in that night. I think the only time where reports get a bit more complicated is on multi-day operations when there's multiple stations working together. And there's a lot of casualty details which need to be gathered and hunted down and when there's really complicated. But for training incidents, there's no reason that a training incident is not complete by the time the base is closed. And in 9.5 out of 10 operations, the same reason for rescues or events or maintenance and logistics. It's just it's a practice. And I think if stations and all of us can get together, we can keep these things much tighter over here. Okay, and especially when they're marked as complete, they can be very quickly moved into completed stage. We also have a multiple check process. So what happens is after it's moved into closed, the EOC are then responsible for moving from closed to signed off, as a double checked in terms of making sure that the data is as accurate as it can be. But I'm cautiously optimistic that the mandatory fields or the force fields will help cover those challenges as we have it. Okay. One of the other things you'll notice is on an operation, for example, and I'm just going to go into this operation happening at Hartbeespoort Dam. For those of you who don't remember, obviously you have call time, incident time, and the difference between the call time and the incident time is sometimes we as sea rescue are called a number of hours after the actual incident happened. And this is genuinely quite a good chronology of when is something happening and when is sea rescue doing something about it. And I'll show you a report now which gives us a nice summary of it. And it's good for a station to sort of analyze what is their response time and what can we do in a proactive sense to reduce the time between the incident and actual call. The title of the incident doesn't really have to be used, which is why we don't have a mandatory field there. But if it's a famous rescue or a newsworthy rescue, a lot of stations, if you've been around for 10 or 20 years, you'll remember past rescues which are quite famous. So the Panacea rescue or the Huncliffe rescue or the Maroshka rescue. That's what the title is for, is just a sort of a common handle that we use for a specific rescue, for media releases and things like that. And then the description is a really important field. And it should be really a 1 or 2 line description of what this rescue is about, so that if you read nothing else, by reading the description, you know what this rescue is about. So 2 people in trouble at this location. This is what happened. Really quick and simple description over here. I've spoken about the stage. I've spoken about the category and the subcategory, and I'll come back to that now. Who's it's received by? That's the EOC operator. If you have caller details, we really should try and capture this as well as the email, because often what happens is when we can create an incident, the caller is actually informed when that incident is completed and dealt with. Okay, and then you can see station, locality, and all the other things that go with it. One of the other new things that you'll notice on the incident report is also this address thing over here. And it gives the coordinate format in degrees, decimal, minutes, which is sort of the standard we use on our charts and on our chart plotters. And unfortunately, at the moment, it's giving us degrees, minutes, seconds. This is one of the things we've logged with them, but we'll probably try to turn that into decimal degrees, because that's what we use. We don't really use DMS anymore. And then obviously an address. As always, this little top left-hand block over here is the location pin of where the actual operation happened. So if I click on that, you should see a specific location pin of where the guys actually did this specific rescue. And where it defaults to is it actually defaults to the rescue base. Now, for example, this afternoon's rescue was actually done somewhere over there, I think it was, because I've seen a pin on the WhatsApp group as such. But this location pin should be moved directly to the incident location. And stations are encouraged to try be as precise as possible with that incident location pin. And especially for coastal stations, which do a lot of rip current work or drowning and prevention calls, so like notably a station like Wilderness, if you're very precise about it, what we can actually do is over a period of time, map exactly where things are happening. So where are known hazardous spots, for example, a rip current adjacent to a pier, and we can see multiple incidents happening at the same location time and time again at a certain time, correlated with a certain tide and a certain time of year. And that gives us really important data so that we can put preventative measures in place to make South Africa a water-safe nation. All right. And here you can put in various things, latitude and longitude, to go find that as well. And I'll come back to the mapping just now. But this is a really important kind of little thing to understand there. Okay, so that map location is important. And if there is no location, then obviously we're not able to move the operation to close. So please work quite hard on getting that location pin. I don't know if there's any questions on that so far. No? Good. All right. Sometimes for an incident, there are multiple calls received. So for example, 3 or 4 people phone in the same incident. If that happens, this is the location where you can add those incident calls received. So who it was, what the number was, and it helps us at the close of an operation to get back to those people to say, okay, the operation has been dealt with. Thanks very much for your call. And, you know, it just helps us to keep in touch with people who let us know. Task reminders. This isn't really something that we're using, but it is an option, especially for bigger stations, or is if there's something which needs to be completed on this specific incident. So let's say you're awaiting the fuel information. What you can do is you can add a task reminder, and you can sort of say, okay, Clint Abrahams is responsible for filling in the fuel usage, because you're waiting for him to get that piece of data. And you can set a data and you can say, okay, is this low, medium, or high? It doesn't send a reminder. It just stays there as a task reminder to remind people. So that is there if so people so want to use it. And then this linked reports is a new thing, which hasn't been around before, but this is really quite important. Those of you will remember we used to have this thing called assisting stations. And this is a policy that's now changed in the organization. So in the past, when there was a multiple operation, so where multiple stations assisted on one rescue, we used to say that the primary station created the SeaWeb operation and the other stations were listed as assisting stations. And we're no longer doing that. Now what happens is each station will create their own specific SeaWeb report, which means they can capture their data about their boats and what they did. But then what we'll be able to do is we'll be able to link the reports together. Okay, so you'll be able to add another report to it. Now, clearly, only the EOC will be able to link the specific reports together, and they will know that from different stations that piece that information together. And then what will happen in short order is we will probably take this assisting stations block away. Okay, so that's something that's going to happen. The messaging section over here, so this ties to the occurrence book. So if you put in a message over here, that becomes one of those occurrence book entries that I referred to just now. And here you can also, now this is a new thing, is this also becomes your radio logbook for your station. So if there was a radio transmission, you can say a radio transmission. If it was a telegram communication, if it was a verbal communication, in other words, your station commander standing in the ops room and says, okay, Jim, you must launch, you can say verbal or WhatsApp, or was it a SafeTracks app alert? And we can add various methods of communication that go with this. Okay, you can see who the person was from, okay, and who's noting this, at what time are they noticing it, and what that specific message was. So this is really the logbook for the actual operation. And there's a couple of things on this. The first thing is your incident, especially during an operation, is a legal document. And those of you who've also been around for a while, we get requests probably one a month on average from lawyers, from South African police, from SAMHSA, from insurance companies, from the Master of the High Court for records regarding drownings and incidents that happened 10 and 15 years ago. And when you go back to those operations 12 years ago or 15 years ago, you can see some stations have been extremely diligent, and you can see the exact time that something happened, who was involved, what happened, what the response was. And it's extremely valuable for example, a family that is trying to wind up in a state of a person that's gone missing, because that's one of the things that are needed, or for insurers, or to help various people out. Okay, so that's really quite important. And the messaging over here must be accurate times, and what is written over here must be well written, professional. So in other words, try and get your spelling, your grammar, your syntax of your correspondence right, because it's probably, especially for important operations, going to be used as a piece of legal evidence. And if it's littered with spelling errors, grammar errors, and just sloppily written, it just creates doubt in the integrity of the report itself, and actually doubt into the integrity of the organization as a whole. So please do be mindful about the messaging, be thorough with it, be concise with it. And as always, if you're putting an opinion, state clearly that this is an opinion. If you're stating a fact, then state that this was seen at this time. It was a blue hull, and the sea was a force 8C. Okay, so various information that goes with this, write that carefully in this. And this is extremely important. The other thing about, yeah.
Sorry, we got a question here from Jared Charlton. Jared, you can go ahead.
Yeah, Jared.
Hi, Brett. Regarding the assisting stations thing,
yes.
With us having a primary station and our secondary station with Notuk, how would we then capture the SeaWeb?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that was actually something that was running through my mind shortly, is that I think for stations that have a satellite station, and especially the satellite station that operates in your context, where it's definitely a satellite, and it gets complicated because some stations have satellites which are almost going to become separate stations. But in Station 6's context, I would actually list your satellite station when it is used as an assisting station. So it helps us to delineate when your satellite station was used as opposed to other operations. So I think that's one context, yeah.
Yeah, because that's how we've been doing it in the past.
Yeah, and I would actually carry on that practice for you guys.
Okay. Just so when you pull the records, it pulls for Notuk only if you want it that way.
Correct, yeah. And that's actually a good point to consider in terms of that.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Good, yeah, good question. And we'll have to correspond with those specific stations to make sure that happens. Okay. Everyone clear on the message aspects? Okay, that's great. With the shore-based personnel in attendance, this is basically the crew that are based on shore, your control room operators and things like that. Ground units are your rescue mobile or your quad bike or your tractor, and your aquatic units are your boats, essentially. So that's really the information that's captured over there. I think it's pretty cut and dry. I don't think I have to go through the specific fields over here. one thing just to be aware of is there's a difference between this fuel used column over here. So the fuel used, just to reiterate it, and nothing's changed here, this is how it's always been, is how much fuel you used on the operation. And generally, if your vessel launched, you've used fuel, even if you kind of gone to the end of the cradle and back, and you can say we used 1 liter. And in most cases, it's an estimate. Even if you're on a jet rib or something like that, it's just put fuel used. If you click on this little scroll wheel over here, you'll see that there's another little window that pops up, and I'm not sure if you can see it, but over here you can see there's a fuel added field. So if you've actually filled up the vessel, you will actually be able to put that fuel added over here. And this is predominantly for the class 1 vessels, where they'll only fill up every 10 or 15 times that they actually put to sea, when there's enough fuel usage to actually make it worthwhile using that. So that's an important field as you put that there. Okay, single engine vessels, so jet ribs and things like that, you'll only fill in the port side. The starboard side, you can just put a 1 and a 1 and just put in a random number to make it real. And then unit personnel, one of the common challenges we have is obviously you list the personnel that are on the asset, and then you have to select the role of that person. So for example, I know that Arthur Crew was the person on this vessel, so I'll just do that for him there quickly. So let's just add Arthur. Okay, so you can see Arthur Crew's there. If you click on that little scroll wheel, you want to select the role that the person was in. Now, Arthur, for instance, may be a class 1 coxswain. He may be a station commander. He may be a whole lot of different things on it. But in the context of what he did in this specific rescue, he was a coxswain class 5. So he's on an inland vessel, on inland waters. In this specific operation, he served in the role of a coxswain class 5. Whether he actually holds a coxswain class 5 ticket or not is beside the point. Okay, you have to list the crew and the roles that they serve, not necessarily the rank they've got on the station. Okay, all right. And let's say Arthur on this specific operation had an injury or did something that was particularly noteworthy. This is where you can put that note. You can update it over here and update that there. All right. And then you can see the role in that little orange block is captured over there. And that's also one of the force fields that will be checked in terms of that. Okay. And this shore-based personnel, ground units of personnel, and aquatic unit personnel, these hours are critically important. And I'll show you why now in terms of some of the reporting, so that we can get good data in terms of what are our crew serving and how are their hours working on station. Aerial units of personnel and attendants are only for stations where there's helicopter operations. And just for the benefit of everyone, I'm not going to go through that now because it is a slightly different process. But for now, we're going to leave that be. Nothing's changed in it. That's how it always has been. So the original tutorials that are there will work for that aspect. Services and attendance. So if there were other services and attendance, for example, South African Police Services, etc., you can list those other services that are in attendance. And you can also say whether they were notified and whether they actually came, as well as what time they were notified and what time they actually arrived. This list is relatively short, and a lot of stations often ask us to add their local sort of private security service and things like that. And if it's substantial and happening all the time, we can add to this list. I'm always quite guardful of the fact of not trying to make this a list of 100 different entities. So 4 entities that are present for multiple stations multiple times, we'll put them here. But I don't want to just have one long list of services. And what you can notice, for example, sometimes you have, I think it's private ambulance services. So you can just add private ambulance services, and then in the notes, you can just include that there with it. And in this section over here, this assisted and casualties. And one of the things I've actually asked SeaWeb to do is actually to move this up to the top of the report so that it's up at the top. But assisted and casualties is probably the single most important section of the SeaWeb report. It really is super critical. And with this, we want to capture as much data, as rich data as we possibly can. And really, technically, you'll see there's a red dot over here. There cannot be an operation without a casualty. It can't happen, because an operation is not an operation unless you went for someone. Even if the call out was for someone and then they self-rescued, or if it was for someone and they drowned and were never found again, it was someone, it was a casualty that we need to list over here. Okay, so what we want to do is add the casualties. And you'll notice there's 4 casualty types. There's a person, animal, craft, or other. So if we go out to a ski boat which has got 6 people in it, you'll add the craft, and then, and I know there was a craft for this rescue, and let's say there were 3 people, we'll add a person over here. Okay. If you went and you were called out for a log or a drum or a buoy or something like that, well, then you can list other. Okay. But in this context, there was a craft and person. If there was a single craft, you'll put 1 craft. Let's say that this craft was an optimist and there were 10 optimists in a regatta and they all had issues over here. What you'll do is you'll just say 10, and then in the description, you'll say optimist dinghy. Okay. And here the character, you can say it was a yacht sailing vessel. There we go. And that will be optimist dinghy world regatta, etc. Okay. Now for person, you can see the casualty. So what we've done over here is we've got a list of the type of persons it was. So in this instance, it would be a which that's supposed to be a Hobie or dinghy sailor. I must actually change that. The status would be, okay, well, if they were code green adult male, small people, and they were black, for example, and there was only 1 black green adult male Hobie dinghy sailor, well, then you'd only have 1 over here, and then you'd add another person, for example, okay, with different categorizations of what they were. And if there were 2 of them, you would add that. And what you want to do in this description field, and the reason why we haven't created hundreds of fields over here is when you add hundreds of fields, you then got to add this force fields, and it makes the capturing of the data very long, very tedious, and it forces people to just not capture the data in the first place. And what we really want with SeaWeb, the philosophy behind it is to make it easy for stations to capture data, so that we at least get the data and we get a better recording than we got through MIS, for example. But then in the description, you want to include James Fink, for example, cell phone number, etc., address if you have it, blue shorts if it had, and try and make this data as rich as you possibly can regarding the person. Like I said, there's no fields for it. It's an open-ended description, but just because it's open-ended doesn't mean that you don't need to capture the data. And remember, this is more for the data record. And just repeating what I said earlier, when we capture an incident, there's data for later statistical analysis. Okay, so for example, your crew hours and what roles they served in is for statistical analysis. Your incident location information is for location geographical analysis. All of these fields, whether it's a category and subcategory, is for statistical analysis. Those things are important. But all the messaging that goes in this, that is just for the incident record. We don't analyze it later. It's only for record for insurances and police claims and whatever else later. Okay. And the casualty data, well, these things, the count, the category, the status, and the classification is for statistical analysis, but the description is for the incident record. Okay. So just bear in mind when you're capturing the descriptions, ask yourself, have I got the right information for this to be used in a court of law in 10 years' time? Am I making this rich enough that this will be useful and it will reflect well on the National Sea Rescue Institute and do justice to the dignity of the person who was in trouble at that point in time? All right, so please capture as much as you can over here. These counts inform our statistics. And ultimately, when we go to donors to raise funds for new boats or new bases or to run training, it's this number is our bottom line. Okay, we're not a for-profit organization that tries to make as much money as we can. We're a rescue organization that tries to rescue as many people as we can. And if stations aren't capturing these numbers, well, you know, less people are going to want to fund us and do things like that. All right, so come on, let me go. Doesn't let me review that. Okay. All right, and then operational responses. So maybe let's go back to also a philosophy aspect of capturing an operations incident. What we want to know about rescues is really 4 things. Okay, we want to know who was in trouble. Okay, so if you go to this casualty over here, you can see that this person over here was a Hobie dinghy sailor. That's the answers the question as to who was in trouble. They were a Hobie dinghy sailor before they were in trouble. Then what we want to know is we want to know what happened to the people. Okay, and what happened to the people is basically in this category and the subcategory. That's the answer to what happened to the people, as well as in the description. Then we want to know who assisted them. Okay, and the question of who assisted them is the station, which station it happened. Where were they assisted is the location pin. And then we want to know, what did NSRI do about it? And the answer to the question of what did NSRI do about it is answered in this operational responses over here. So in a similar way, if there's no data in this operational response, and you'll see there's a red little dot over here, it basically means that the station didn't do anything, which is not the case. The station always did something. And once again, when you select this, you will see all of these are questions about what the NSRI did about that person who got into trouble in a certain category. And then the attributes is extra information regarding the operational response. It's a way of statistically analyzing the story as such. Okay, so for each and every operation, there needs to be an operational response as well as an attribute that goes with that. Okay, so let me just get rid of that so I can keep this operation clean. Okay, and then map boundaries. This is not something you have to use, but for stations who've done a search, for example, or they've gone into multiple areas in a river environment or in an offshore environment, you're able to make a polygon on the map, which is also just for the incident record. There's no statistical analysis of this map boundary section. And then lastly, of quite importance is the weather conditions. And same thing for insurance claims, and 10 years later, they want to know what are the weather conditions that are available. And then it's also just good for us for statistical analysis. We can analyze a station or a particular asset over a 5-year period and say, well, okay, station X is asking for an AUK. It's a 20 million rand investment. Let's look at their rescues over the last 10 years. And we see that in all of their rescues in the last 10 years, they've gone out in grizzly southeasters or northeasters in a force 6 or more with 4-meter swells and 0 visibility. And most of their rescues are done in austere weather conditions. And you know what? That justifies the station having an AUK. But if there's no data, in other words, the station hasn't captured it, and it's wind force 0 in 1-meter swell heights with good visibility all the time, you know what? Let's send them a jet rib rather. So please use this and populate this weather conditions as well. Those of you who will remember is on SharePoint, and I'm just going to open up SharePoint quickly. NSRI SharePoint. I just want to show you something that's quite valuable. Just wait for SharePoint to open up. On these weather conditions is this wind force is a Beaufort scale. Okay, so on SharePoint, just wait for mine to open up. If it does, if you go to the external links section of SharePoint, you will see one of the buttons that opens up on that page is a Beaufort forecast. And often people overestimate the wind force or the wind strength. And the reality is, more often than not, it's 2 notches below what kind of people would ask for. So use that, the South African Weather Service's Beaufort wind forecast to get that right. Okay, cool. Is everyone all right? Everyone still with me there? All good. Okay. Good. And then lastly over here is a comments block, which is also just general comments for the station commander to fill in or any of the crew. So if there were injuries or damages or anything noteworthy, you want to include it in the comments. And then if the operation had a media release, which was done by Craig, what we encourage is just take the media release from Craig and copy it in there verbatim into the comment section. And that's really it. And then if there's any other images, so the WhatsApp images of the WhatsApp group, and like I said, if we get the Telegram integrator, that'll automatically go into this, or any documents, indemnity forms for paramedics or something like that, you can upload that as part of the operation over here. And that's really the process of capturing an operation in SeaWeb and capturing the major sort of changes to the system. Okay, are there any questions on that? No. Okay. So then maybe just a quick run through. Once you've captured your data accurately, if you go to incidents, there's basically 2 or 3 reports, and I want to show you where and how to find them. So if you go to the incidents on the left-hand side over here and you go to the search box, wait for that to load through. Sorry, my internet seems to be hanging a little bit.
Sorry, Brett, we got another question from Mike while we're waiting. Mike, do you want to go
If you can
ahead?
see my
Okay,
having a moment.
yeah, thanks, Brett. Just a quick question going back onto your assets. Now, if you launch like your class 1, class 3 vessel and you're out on training and you do crew swaps and that, how would you go about logging those on each different vessel? Over.
I think we've lost Brett.
Well, just checking, I'm back online. Hello?
Yeah, we can
Brett,
hear you,
yeah.
Brett.
Sorry.
We said that we had a question from Mike.
Okay,
Mike,
cool.
do you
Sorry, I
want
had
to repeat the
load
question?
shedding there that kicked in for a moment. Yeah, sorry, I'm back here.
Okay, not a problem. Sorry, Brett, just a question on your assets. When you're out at sea, especially
Yes.
on training, now if you do crew changes between vessels, like you've got your class 1, class 3, and you swap out the crews to do training on the class 1, how do you log that on your trips?
Okay, good question. That's a fantastic question. So if you go back to the incidents over here, sorry, I'm just waiting for my internet to catch up again. And I'll just show you, a real example of it. Just wait for my screen to load. So I've changed over to my Wi-Fi and we're in the middle of load shedding. So my internet's just starting to hang a little bit. And if I go, and you have multiple trips. So let's say you have aquatic units and personnel attendants, you have multiple vessels. So what you do is you'll add a vessel. I'm just searching for something. Okay, there we go. So I can just add one vessel over here. Okay, so you can see one vessel is added, and if I go over here, add, I can add that same vessel again. Sorry, is everyone back again?
Yep.
Yeah, we can hear you, Brett.
Okay, cool. Okay, so you can see there's Nadine Gordimer trip 3, trip 2, and trip 1. So what you'll do is for trip 1, when there's out at sea, you'll list your crew for that specific trip with a start and an end. And while out at sea, if there's a different crew that suddenly gets it, what you'll do is you'll add the crew for the second trip with a start and an end, and the third trip, and so forth and so on. If a station is doing multiple chops and changes, in other words, you're doing 25 trips, and let's say you're at wilderness and you're doing surf rescue training, and you're doing 25 or 50 beaches and launches, and you're swapping crews all the time. In that instance, remember the important thing over here is the number of hours that get allocated to a crew. So what you can do is sort of average out your operation so that your crew get the right amount of time for the actual time they were on board. It doesn't have to be prescribed to an exact trip. If it's a rescue operation, yes, it has to be super accurate. But if it's for training, it doesn't have to be exactly spot on with it. Remember, for the Coxswain applications, we use the paper-based logbook, not necessarily this. So as long as this approximates what was really done, then that is fine for that purpose. Does that answer your question, Mike?
Not quite, but yeah, I think you're trying to get it, Brett.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so ultimately, so let's say Rescue 6 launched. I'll try to explain it in a different way. And you had Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and Delta. They were random names of some crew who were all on trip 1. And then 3 hours later, you'll put end hours over here. Delta climbs off and Echo climbs on. What you'll do is you'll have Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and Echo on trip 2 from the start hours at the same time as the end hours of trip 1. And let's say Bravo then got off 2 hours after that. On trip 3, you'll have Alpha, Charlie, and Echo on trip 3, for example. So that's how you would capture that scenario there. Okay.
Okay, yeah, no, I get that. So you'd basically have to radio your engine hours back through to rate control each time.
So once again, what's important over here is this time over here, the launch, on scene, and close time. The engine hours aren't super critical. What's important is that the start of trip 1 is correct and the end of your last trip is correct. The other numbers in between are less relevant as long as there's some approaching number in the middle there. So it is a bit of a schlep, but it doesn't happen that often. Okay, so it's one of the sort of the challenges we have in terms of making it happen. It was the same system on the MIS as well, by the way. And we haven't, if anyone's got any ideas in terms of making that more streamlined, I'm all ears. It's the best method we can think about in terms of making that happen.
Okay, that's perfect. Thanks, Brett.
Cool. Going back to incidents on the left-hand side, and if you go down to search, just wait for that to load. Like I said, there's 3 ways you can get reports of operations for your station. So if you go to that search on the incidents on the left-hand side, just wait for this little red line to close up over here.
Sorry, Brett. Donovan Stephen also has a question. Hand up.
Yeah.
Great. Just a quick one. In terms of the images and attachments, the documents that we've got quite a lot of medical response calls. The medical aid cards and the patient's IDs. Is it okay if we capture those images there as well? Is it safe and secure and all in compliance with the POPI Act?
Yes. Yeah, that's fine. And that is the idea. So once those attachments are uploaded, only sort of StatCom level has access to that. So it is relatively secure in that context. On that note, unrelated to SeaWeb, but just in terms of the general communication on station, WhatsApp, and Telegram groups, is we don't encourage people to put that information on the call-out group available to all the crew. Rather send that communication, if you are going to send it, directly to the EOC phone and sort of keep that control group quite tight with that kind of confidential information as such. Okay. All right. So on this advanced search, I think most people know how this works. There's not much that's new here over here. Obviously, you can select a date criteria. You can select whether it's if you want to analyze the training on your station or the operations on your station. And obviously, you can select the status, so whether it's open, signed off, closed, validated, and all those kind of things. And then what you can do is you can search for it. So let's just take an example over here of operations. And I'm looking for dispatch location, station 8. Hout Bay. Let's just choose them and let's say operations since the beginning of the year, 1st of January to present. All right, so that's all that we're going to do for now is just click search. And you can see this says they have 8 search results. So at the bottom over here, it lists the actual operations that they've done. And you can drill into any of these operations to go see it. But one of the 2 things which is quite valuable over here is you can see this view results on the map. So if you click on that, it pops the little map screen up over here with where the operations have been zoomed in to Station 8 Hout Bay. So this is where Station 8 Hout Bay base is, and you can see where their operations are taking place around their area operations. So they've had a couple of inland calls, they've had some calls at the Boss 400, some on this hiking trail, some at Seal Island where the tourists are, and some in Maori Bay over here. So it's quite useful for a station to see where their operations are taking place and some of the things that they need to do. And then the other thing which is quite useful is you can actually export the results to Excel. So if you want to analyze your own data, when you do that, it opens up a page with a whole lot of sort of search fields which you can add or to your report. So you can select what you want to see and then export that to Excel and play with it as much as you want to see it. So that's a way of seeing the number of incidents that your station has done. But then if you go on the left-hand side over here down to places, there are other reports that you can see for your station. So you go to places, you go to search places. Once again, you will only see your own station. But if I go over here to region 8, sorry, not region 8, to station 8 Hout Bay, and I click view, you'll see information regarding your station. But then on the top right-hand side here, you'll see this reports button. And when you click on that reports button, you'll see various reports for your station. And there's a ground report, so you can see information regarding your mobile, aquatic report regarding your vessels with launch times and fuel information and things like that, which is quite powerful. And then the one which is quite important is this casualties report. So if you select this casualties report and then the personnel log report. So the casualties report, if you open up that, also opens up a filter over here. So you can say, okay, since the start of the year until today, and you can see for all operations. Now, remember, casualties can be generated in events and in operations. So both of those can have casualties, because if you're doing a standby for a surf ski race and you end up doing a rescue, you'll have casualties on an event. So just bear that in mind there as well. Okay, and let's just filter that one, for example. And here it gives you a summary of who this station has rescued. So they've rescued 1 yacht sailing vessel, 1 yachtsman, 1 vessel passenger, and then 3 unknown persons, 1 random citizen, and 5 nearshore runner hikers. And then if you want to go deeper into that data, you can see that information here, as well as which operations had a certain number of casualties on them. So that's a useful report for a station. And then the last one, which I'm not going to go through the full detail of the report, because if you go onto SharePoint in the administration folder in NSRI Station Shared, it tells you how to do this. But if you also choose a specific station, NSRI Station 8 Hout Bay, for example, and you go to reports and you go to the personnel log report, then there's a process on how you can export this to Excel and actually analyze your crew person's hours over a certain type of period. And you can see which roles they've been on, what resource they've been on. And it's a very powerful report to see who on your station is contributing, who's doing things, who's meeting those minimum requirements. And generally, as an organization in the coming years, we're going to move to more of a system where we reward people and recognize people based on the number of hours they serve, as opposed to just the number of years that you've been here. So, those who commit and give more will be incentivized more, if that makes sense. So, that's just a broader philosophical conversation in terms of where we are. Okay, and that pretty much runs through SeaWeb as you go through it. Just 2 other things I want to quickly show you is up on the top page over here, you can see there's a little thing over here which says active incidents map. So if I click on that one over here, it opens up a little map. And this is more for the EOC to see, but they can see where incidents are happening around the country. So they can kind of manage this in a geographical sense. I'm just waiting for this little map to load quickly, if it does. And then what we have done is we've taken the various stations' operational areas. So, for example, this is the operational area, I think, for Port Nolloth, 40 nautical miles up from Alex Bay, basically down to south of Plains here. And if you click on that map, what it does is it shows you for the EOC which station's operational area it is in, and especially for other parts of the country where there are overlapping things. You can see over here, okay, that is Azefontein and Milkboss's Strand's combined operational area that is over there. And there are various other map features that you can use in terms of this, as well as for map searching and that kind of stuff. So the mapping has become quite a lot more powerful with this facility. And then the last thing, which is quite valuable over here, is if you click on this little car, and this is more for the EOC, but when stations radio through their engine hours or close hours, instead of having to go navigate into the incident, you can just click on that little active resources, go to the actual resources that are out at the moment, and put in the engine hours over here without having to go into incidences and close and navigate in and out. So that is it. And then the very last thing which I wanted to say is a lot of people asked a question about SeaWeb and an app. And yes, there is a sort of an app for SeaWeb. But what you'll find is this new update that has happened. If you put in the URL https://seaweb.org.za into your phone's mobile browser and you log in, you'll actually see that this website is actually very mobile friendly as it is. So if you operate it as a website on your phone browser, it is relatively nicely navigable with your phone. So it's not quite an app, but it works very similarly to an app. So for those stations that are sort of trying to capture data out and about or while driving somewhere, you can do so. And especially some of the messaging features. So if you want to send a text message, for example, you can go and you can send the messaging, via that system as you go. All right, so that is the SeaWeb update as we have it. Are there any other questions? Has anyone got? Otherwise, I think that's it. Let's call it a night.
We've got one more question. Skulk, go ahead.
Hi, Brett. Yeah, so I just want to come back to the multiple trips. So what we usually do with the engine hours and fuel, we will put that in the latest trip. For example, you've done 3 trips. Then we'll put in the hours and the fuel in trip 3.
Correct. So just beware now with the mandatory fields, there will have to be data in the intermediate trips. So you'll have to at least put a number in or something like that for that. But like I said, as long as the opening one is done and the final one is done, then everything else is okay. So good point, Scott.
Thank you.
Cool. I think we'll have one more question from Tim, and then if you guys have any further questions, you're welcome to email us. So let's just do the last one from Tim, and then we'll call it at that. Thanks very much.
How's it, Brett? Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yeah. Brett, just a quick question with regards to reporting, and I think this question will be for the benefit of everyone else as well. When it comes to reporting things like injuries to crew and or damage to vessels, obviously the incident reporting form on SeaWeb is a little bit on the generic side. In other words, there's no fields in terms of to put in like to select the vessel that was involved or select the crew member that was involved. Is there no way to amend that so that it can be done so that if you ever want to pull up statistics with regards to damages on a specific vessel or injuries to a specific crew member for future reference, is there any plans on upgrading that section of SeaWeb? Over.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. So those of you who aren't aware, if you go into SeaWeb, if you go into incidents, one of the incident types is something which is called internal. Okay, and this is for things like near misses, injuries, damages, accidents, things like that. There's 3 rules on this. The first one is, even though there's a place to log it in SeaWeb internal, always communicate with your operations manager or the EOC when an incident happens on your station. So just via WhatsApp, via Telegram, via a phone call, a voice note, let your operations manager know and let the EOC know. And say, listen, this incident has happened, so that there's a verbal kind of non-digital communication about an incident. So that's the first step. Then for incidents which are sort of less serious, every incident needs to go onto SeaWeb so that it's logged. And at the moment, the SeaWeb internal incident thing is quite light. We've deliberately made it light at this point over here. So you can just capture the incident of what time the actual incident happened, which stations it at, severity, category, description, and message, where it specifically happened, and that's really all that there is to it. The idea is that on the actual main incident, you can actually link this internal to that as well. So you can actually connect this to your main incident so that you don't have to duplicate it. As we go forward, what we are going to be doing is making this a little bit more thorough, this internal thing, so that we actually capture that data to it. But when there's an incident, we actually have another control system which we're using at the moment, where we actually log the incidences, near misses, injuries, and damages. But the eventual plan is to build that into SeaWeb properly. If an injury is serious, in other words, there's a cost or an insurance claim, or a crew person has been injured or major damage, what happens is the incident forms that reside on SharePoint will still be used for that purpose over here. So the SeaWeb is really just a place to log it and to make note that something has happened. It's not supposed to be an exhaustive, thorough kind of incident reporting tool. It's really just as a place to store that something happened and let it be known. If it escalates, then there's a whole other process that goes in terms of managing that for now. And hopefully that clarifies that one.
No, that's fantastic. Thanks very much. Well answered. Cheers.
Cool. Good question.
Cool. I think we'll end it at that. From all of us, thanks very much, Brett, for taking the time to run us through SeaWeb and all the updates. Much appreciated. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks, everyone. And yeah,
Thanks,
anytime,
everyone.
pop an email through anytime with any questions.
Cool. Thanks, Brett. Thanks, everybody. Have a lekker evening. We'll catch up with you all soon.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Brett, guys.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Have a good one. Catch up again soon.